Effectively, this just becomes the runoff from the downpour. It's just whenever we have
Yes.
more things to talk about the Seattle Torrent. Welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports, paired with Dylan from Emerald City Hockey. You're gonna get used to Dylan, as you probably already have. Yeah, just wanted to put this episode out. We've got a few days before the Torrent return to action. Sunday against the Boston Fleet. Isn't it so lovely that you play Boston just, a few games ago on the road in the midst of that long road trip, Dylan, and then you get to see them again. And they remain red hot. They haven't lost at home. Thankfully, this game is in Seattle, so maybe that'll give you some reprieve, but it
I
doesn't get any easier. It won't ever get easier in this league until I
no.
don't know when the talent dilution will ever happen. It'll take a
I,
long time.
it gets easier Sunday, January 25th when you get to play Vancouver again. What are you talking about?
Oh, yes, the two. All right.
I don't know
And
about
that's
you.
in
I
Vancouver, isn't it?
No, it's in Seattle. Oh no, it's
Oh,
it's it's not in either. It's a Ball Arena in
oh,
Denver.
it's the
That's the
Denver
takeover
game.
tour game. So, um, but I don't know about you. For me, a lot of aspects of that game in Boston made it like I think their best game of the road trip. Maybe I don't know. The Toronto game was
Better.
probably their best game of the road trip, but
Okay, yeah.
I actually feel like that was arguably the game that they kind of fought the hardest and they played the most tight systems wise and the most complete kind of game.
And given the opponent, I would. Yeah, okay, that would make sense to me. All right, well, we are going to talk about that. I told Dylan, I said, hey, we're 10 games into this season. The Torn are actually the only team that have only played 10 games. Everybody is at least at 11 now. Montreal, Minnesota, and New York are all at 11. Everyone else is at 12. Ottawa has played 13 for some reason. Um, yeah, 10 games into this inaugural season, just wanted to look at some things that stick out about this team, some things that are becoming apparent, just some minor, observations, trends, notes. And both Dylan and I spoke with head coach Steve O'Rourke at practice yesterday. Um, and Steve is, I said this to Dylan afterwards. Dylan wasn't surprised, but Steve's very relatable. He is a self-proclaimed sports nerd. So we spent a good amount of, like, the recording itself is 17 minutes, and we talked for longer than that. I didn't realize we were bothering the guy for that long. But yeah, no, Dylan, I think we'll start before we get to the lack of successful beginnings to games. With just a road trip. All in all, despite them only winning the one game on the road, and as you pointed out when we were talking yesterday, it was an overtime win, so you get just the 2 points
Mhm.
in the standings. He seemed pretty happy with the road trip and like all encompassing a look at it. Just given what they were on the road for 17 days, their worst loss of the season, which they've both come against Minnesota. Uh, their worst loss of the season comes, against the Frost team on, yeah, the last day of that 17-day trip. They had a week in Toronto, which is kind of awkward. You're just kind of standing around in Toronto, trying to kill time. You play New York in that takeover tour game, and as he mentioned, which I agreed, I mean, that game was fully there for the taking, which makes it more
Mhm.
frustrating for me, is that they had a ton of chances to effectively bury it, right? But
Yep.
PC O'Brien comes and scores a hat trick and has her best game of her young career, and you let them back into it, and you lose that one to begin the trip. You beat Toronto in the shootout, which is nice to see. Nice to get Corinne Schroeder that first win. The Boston game, you already kind of talked about it, but yeah, nice to see them push the best team in the league, the best team by now a 7 point margin in the standings, and then falling flat. There's a lot that goes into it. Day of your road trip, Minnesota's playing their first home game in I think a month. You know, so and even then he thought that there's some instances where if a puck goes their way, that was another thing that Steve talked about was not getting the bounces quite yet.
Schedule.
Right.
You have to live with the schedule, and no different than these guys over here. What they've had to go through in this break, 17 games in 28 days. So you go with it, but it was down to Dallas, and then we have this time sitting in Toronto, play the game, a little bit a little bit of downtime again, go to Boston, a little bit of downtime, and it was hard. Like on the road, like you don't get your practice time at 10:30, 11 o'clock. We're at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. So you're all over the place with it. So the routine gets out of sync. But in terms of the road trip, when I look at it, we let one go in New York. We played really, really well. And we had 2-1. We had basically really good opportunities to close that game out and go 3-4-1, either with a couple 2-on-1s we had, power play, we score 1, 2 of those, that game's done. New York is over. But we let a high skills team stick around, take a penalty, they score a power play, so they're right back in it, and then we're chasing it. But that is a game we should have, every stat was in our favor, and so we got let that get away. And then Toronto, we went and had a really good game in Toronto, going to Boston, and I thought that was almost a playoff game. Like it was hard. There was not a lot of ice out there. We only gave them 5 scoring chances, 5-on-5. It was really, really tight. But tough thing is we gave them 5 power plays, and we had some start the game. I liked the way we started. Bilks takes that 1 penalty, and it's aggressive, it's emotional, I think, kind of penalty, and we'll live with that. We will, But then the others, it just falls how it falls, right? And to only give them 23 shots to that team and 5 power plays, I thought it was good. And then at the end of the trip on a Sunday, that was a tough one mentally. And again, we look at the score, you look at the result, but we hung around there. There was chances. Bilks had a 2-on-1 there. We had some looks. Gosling had a nice move off the wall, hit the post. Like one of those goes in, your energy changes at the end of a trip. It's 1-1, or 1-0 if we scored 1-2-on-1. 1-1, and you just the bench kind of feels it. But as it slowly slips, it was tough to keep that mental toughness going. But I like that they, like from Murph out, everyone kept on going right to the 60-minute mark. So that's a good sign of the team too.
Which, sure.
It's been a problem.
Right. But yeah, I know we talked about on the downpour. Is there anything maybe after talking with him that sticks out to you about the trip, or maybe, anything that he might have mentioned that might have sparked a thought in you about the road trip?
Yeah, just how brutally long it was, right? Because it obviously felt long for all of us being here in Seattle. It felt like, well, especially for me because I had to leave town before they
Right.
left. So like it's been like a month and a half since I've seen any of these people. But it that was the thing that kind of came across. I mean, talking to anybody around the team and listening to them talk about it was just how long this road trip was. On the road for over 2 weeks as far as being out of Seattle, and only 4 games in that time. So even, taking out like exactly how they were scheduled, you're talking about like 2 games a week. You're talking about having 3-4 days between games on average while on the road. It's just kind of an awkward setup, awkward situation there. And that's, I think, kind of what Steve got at when he was talking with us, was just that it throws off your rhythm when you're on the road that long, and especially when you're actually traveling and things like that, because you're not getting the premium practice window at any of the facilities.
Right.
Not only are you not in your own facilities, you're not sleeping in your own bed and stuff on outside of the facilities and everything, but you're also then not getting the premium scheduling anywhere that you go because you're the visiting team, and it just makes it hard to work on things. And you got travel days, you have other things that get in the way of practicing, so your practice schedule becomes less regular. Everybody's practicing at different times than what they're used to. We know this about professional athletes and especially hockey players. They're so routine based. You take them out of their routine and they don't know what to do, right? That all goes out the window when you're on the road that long, stuck in one location as long as you were in Toronto. Like it's just a really awkward spot. And it sounded like not only was, in that Frost game, maybe, oh, we didn't get the right bounces at the beginning or something like that. Stuff didn't help us kind of build momentum easily in that game. But you're also just dealing with like all of that emotion, pent up frustration, and everything that's been awkward about the 2 weeks that you've been gone. it just all kind of comes together there. And it sounded like talking to him that it was very much one of those like once the game kind of got away from them, it was just like, let's just survive this and get out of here.
Yeah, let's get out of here. Yeah, no, that's it's funny you mention, not being able to work on things, right? Because that is a great transition here to the starts. But I will say it is funny you mentioned the routine and sleeping in our bed because and it's just to prove that this is such a big thing across sports. So I was at a Seattle Rain press conference this morning. They're because of the Men's World Cup coming here, they're going to have to play 3 matches in Spokane, which is its own issue. But because it's Spokane, they'll be able to fly back home and sleep in their own bed as opposed to just, instead of not having the home games, just
Hmm.
playing on the road. So yeah, no, obviously nobody needs the extra example, but I thought that was funny because that happened today. But yeah, the slow starts, it's something that is a bit infuriating. It like stood out, especially, again, you talk about them being away for so long. The hometown was so nice because it's 5 games in a row. There was a little bit of the rivalry series break in there, yes, but they still even had some practices. But yeah, they just started out really slow. The New York, they don't score at all in the Minnesota home game. The New York game, 2 goals come very late. Things get to shift. But yeah, that was one of the big things. I think it was ahead of the Minnesota game, Dylan. I think we were texting during that game. Um, half of Seattle's goals have come in the third period,
Yep.
which is not good. And so, yeah, you were able to ask Steve yesterday about the slow starts.
I think we've had to build a lot of stuff from kind of the back end out, from defensive zone to breakouts to neutral zones. Our next element now is that the entries, the finish. Like today, we had focus on that. We're gonna have focus for the next couple days with that. Our numbers, like in terms of exits, we're the #1 passing out team in the league. We've had to put a ton of focus on that to connect this whole group, right? D's to D, D's to center, D's to the wingers. All this stuff is starting to connect that way. Our entries, we're #1 in passing entries. But we drop off on the actual successful play, the shot on net, the scoring chance. That's an area that, again, we haven't put enough focus on. Now we have to change that. And that's the cat and mouse of the whole year, right? It's like you hope the group kind of locks onto something. You don't have to go backwards, but you always have to brush and touch up things. But like we're gonna have to focus on our entries, right? So now you hope you don't lose the neutral zone forecheck in the meantime, right? That we didn't work on that this week, right? And that's like you look at we do have decent amount of practice time now, and if you look at the NHL, they make those adjustments just through video, right? We still, I feel we have to, as a group, because we haven't been together, we need these reps in practice to feel it,
Yeah.
Like our forecheck, I think, has been doing good. We came up against a couple different type of breakout teams and thought we did a good job adjusting from just on the pre-scout. We knew what Boston wanted to do. I think we did a good job. Minnesota, for the most part, we did a good job with it. For the most part, we had some mental errors that ended up in some big chances or goals against, right? And that was day 17 of a trip, right? So,
Yeah.
But I like the numbers where they're trending. We got to get some goals, and that makes everyone feel good, loosens up everything, and makes it easier. And right now, we're grinding that side of it. And yeah, there's been opportunities to start games where we score that goal, you're feeling good. You get a 2-on-1, you score that goal, you're feeling good, right? And
Yep.
it'll come, and we still got lots of pressure just with our Olympics coming. There's lots. Having 8 players involved in that process. Now we're down to 6 that are still involved in that process that are trying to just be mentally ready for that. It's a lot. It's a lot to ask the group. And it only happens every 4 years.
Yeah.
It's not like a world championship where, hey, if I miss this one or whatever, I'll get the next one. It's every 4 years, and this is my first experience with it, and it's huge. It's huge. It's such excitement to it.
And it was interesting because you mentioned not being able to work on things, and that was something he kind of mentioned a little bit, right? Was how they're effectively still working on things, still building things out. As he mentioned, building things out from the back. Um, which is a little bit interesting to me, but I understand it given, you and I have talked about it on shows before, but having a limited training camp, and then being thrown effectively into the fire in this league. Yeah, I guess what did you make of what he said about the slower starts, and I guess what stood out to you about the starts for this team, um, through 10 games? Because I mean, you look at the Vancouver game and the inaugural game, they do cut. There's the Gosling weird goal, and then there's their elite shot, but
Mhm.
there haven't been a ton of great opportunities for this team to go ahead. I think that game and the Sirens game in the Takeover Tour in Dallas were the two instances of maybe having a decent to good start. Everything else has been kind of slow or bad, effectively.
Yeah, and I felt like this was the one time that he didn't maybe give us like a super direct answer was
Mm,
on the fast starts kind of thing, which like I am definitely not complaining because that meant we asked him like 6 or 7 questions and it meant he gave a direct answer on all of those, which for a coach is very rare to get that and I'll definitely take it. But I think that, it was kind of a combination of things, right? Listening to what he had to say to us. It's the momentum type swing stuff like that he talked about, or that we were talking about earlier, where if you get a bounce, right, you get the puck luck, which is just very much something in hockey, and it goes your way early in the game, just kind of gets everybody going. You all get on that page. That energy around that fuels you. You're able to gain some early momentum and you can then carry that forward and like continue to build off of that. And it kind of feels like right now they'll work hard at the beginning of the game, but nothing really comes out of it, and therefore there's nothing for them to then build off of, right? And so I think that that's one component of this. The other thing that he talked about, and he used this as the opportunity to really talk about what they've been trying to work on. And if you go back to the conversations that we were able to have with him at the beginning of the year or any of the more public facing um, addresses or anything like that that the team has been making, it was that this was going to be a process. It's going to be a year
right.
long thing, that it takes time to work on systems, get everybody on the same page for things. He mentioned yesterday working on building out their breakouts and how he feels like they've now gotten to a place where they're able to break out the puck very efficiently and that everybody knows what they're doing. They're on the same page. This is certainly, when it comes to those breakouts, a decor that's seen lots of pieces move around at various times because of injury, suspension, just the normal, situations of changing up your D pair as you just need to for chemistry reasons. And so he kind of felt like they're getting there when it comes to the breakouts. I do agree with that. He said their focus now is shifting to the zone entries. I thought it was interesting that he said that based on their internal numbers, they're actually the best team when it comes to breakouts and the best team when it came to passes to lead to zone entries.
Right.
But then once they enter the zone, where do we go from there? Where does the team go for there? How do you start setting things up and getting the looks that you want? And what are the looks that you want and everything there? And that very much matches the eye test for me. Like this is not a team that flies through the neutral zone, enters the zone, and then has a plan, right? Like they have like some vague plans. If it's an opportunity to attack off the rush, they're going to do that. But as far as what does their cycle look like? Where do they want to get players open in the offensive zone for shots? Are they trying to attack the slot? Are they trying to play from the perimeter and then pass down to the net front? Do they want to be a heavy forechecking team in the corners, right? Force teams to spend defensive resources there to open things up, maybe net front for somebody. We just haven't really gotten a clear picture of what that is for this team because they just haven't been able to sustainably do much in the offensive zone yet. And it sounds like, talking to Coach O'Rourke yesterday, that's coming. It's just that everything takes time when you're dealing with an expansion team and a group that came together still. We're talking about 2 months ago.
Yeah. God, that's crazy to even hear you say it. But yeah, to go back to that point about, some of the internal numbers and then, going to, okay, those numbers are great that he's mentioned, but what do you do when you get into the zone? It is a little bit gratifying because there's so many instances where I'm like, hey, it just looks like you're trying to find somebody to get open. It looks like to me, it's closer to like a stagnant basketball offense where your point guard has got the ball at the top of the key and nobody's moving. There's
Yeah.
one guy maybe was like, "Yeah, I need to see more." So yeah, no, that made sense to hear from him, and it made me feel a little bit better. I'm not super genius here, but it is interesting. And again, as you mentioned, with the public facing, and it's something that you know I get excited when they do get the Montreal game was exciting because they got the win. Ottawa, I wasn't as jazzed because kind of expected it against Ottawa, and especially since they didn't have Gwyneth Phillips in goal. Like you've seen them. I don't like this idea because they are in the standings. They are technically seventh in the league. I
Hmm.
get it. Right. I'm not taking stock though that they're going to finish around there. I don't like the idea of just making the final push in the final month of the season, but I
Yeah.
understand that it will be a process. Like this, that made sense already, right? But hearing from the head coach about the different steps that are being taken made it all kind of like I have a timeline, I have an idea, like I have a better understanding of that process, right? So, um, it makes me feel a little bit better of, understanding that I'm not going to do myself over where they sit in the standings. Something that, probably does hinder their ability to get anything set up is how many penalty minutes they've had to deal with, Dylan. And
Yeah.
certainly that was a big topic of discussion in the last Downpour episode that we talked about. There are some thoughts there. And certainly a team and a decor that is very they're well equipped to be physical, let's say that.
Yeah.
They're certainly enforcing that sort of thing. I was a little bit interested when you asked Steve about this and he started to respond to it because um he said that there's penalties to be had, and I think he meant that more in terms of them not getting power plays.
That's how
Um
I took it too. Yeah.
okay, because initially I was a bit confused, but I do think later into his answer because he started talking about the officiating and how this because that's something that we brought up, right?
Like, I feel right now there's still bounces to be had. There's still penalties to be had, right?
Hmm.
I'm not saying we didn't deserve penalties, but I think there's opportunities there that we could get right back in with a very similar call. And like the couple penalties, like some of our aggressiveness is just how we want to play. It's not physical. We're not taking elbowing penalties or charging or boarding penalties. Like we're playing aggressive up in people's face, and sometimes that stick goes out when you're going to be aggressive. That stick goes out, you trip somebody. We had a couple goals in Minnesota, a couple tripping penalties. That's not. It's unfortunate, kind of the way maybe we took an angle at it, right? Or how quickly a play transitioned, and we were right there. We go like that, and it's a trip, right? So, I don't think there's any trend per se saying, "Hey, oh man, we're just taking so many boarding penalties." It's just hockey, and I think personally, I think the PWHL might be the hardest league to ref because we have some nuances in it, and we don't have full-time referees just dedicated to us. So they come and they do their absolute best they can, adjusting from maybe NCAA, maybe American League, to female NCAA, male NCAA, Canadian Hockey League. They're all under different rules, right? And they come here and have to, in the moment, decide, is that boarding? Is that checking? Right? Like, the one thing that I'm a little surprised about is the amount of stick work that goes on in the league. But other than that, I think our refs do a solid job in the kind of constraints they're at, right? Like the NHL guys, they just ref the NHL. They're paid to do that. For us, I know we pay them well, we get good officials, but it's tough to switch a rule like just like that, especially our contact rule. That is a tough one to we need to be meeting like this. We can't be meeting like this. And some days this gets away, and some days it doesn't. And you don't that's a little bit of the inconsistency. The rest of it, I think, is fine. They're good officials and put in a tough situation, I think, in terms of that. And as we grow, I think we'll end up having those full time when they're going to get to this, and then we'll have full time officials. Right?
Is
Hmm.
is how the hits and the physicality is officiated. Again, it was just kind of a pull back the curtain thing that maybe we don't really get with this league in specific. Maybe sometimes, I don't have a direct comparison right now, but I did appreciate that. What did you take away from how he answered the question about the discipline, the physicality, because again, I'll probably go back because I do want to write up this sort of thing about trends
Mhm.
but I don't know if there's a team in this league specifically. I doubt in the NHL where they've taken, 3 to 4 penalties a night and had any sort of conducive success. It just doesn't seem like it's
It's
gonna. You have might must have the best penalty kill and the best goal in the world to have to deal with that all the time, and even then you're still at a disadvantage. So anyway, yeah, what stood out to you about that? Because initially I was a bit confused, but as he went on, I understood his viewpoint a bit more.
Yeah, it was it's certainly something that does not lend itself to being a, top team in the league when you're leading the league on a per game basis and penalties taken like the Torrent are. I'm with you. I read the initial part of the conversation or of his answer as, look, we're getting called for a lot of stuff right now, but there's a lot of stuff out there, and maybe we're not always getting those calls, right? Like at some point, maybe this like kind of just evens out, and it's
Right.
just that, look, we're getting caught right now. That happens. It's going to take care of itself over the course of the season. What I thought was interesting because I did, try to phrase the question when asking him around the idea of being maybe overly physical, that thing that they've talked about the whole team all along since they've come together a couple months back was playing fast, playing physical, being aggressive, all of those things, right? And so I wanted to make sure to like kind of phrase the question around that, like, is that playing into this at all? And I thought he did a really good job of saying, no, it's not, because when you look at the penalties that they're actually taking,
Mm,
it's a lot of stick-based penalties. It's a lot of tripping calls. It's a lot of things built around that. They're not taking charging penalties. They're not taking a lot of illegal contact penalties, right? They're not taking boarding calls, all of those things that you would think would be the penalties if the team was in fact playing too reckless, too aggressive, too physical. And so and I agree with him. Like that is true. A lot of their penalties are other types of infractions. I think there's something to be said for kind of still always putting yourself in a position where maybe you have to take that stick penalty, where you have to take that trip, where you
mm.
have to whatever, just defensively, right? So I think there's maybe something there. I get him not necessarily wanting to go down that road and talk about it. That's certainly something that could be expanded on in the future, though, when we talk to him. But I do agree with him there that this is not as much as sometimes they are taking those physical penalties, like we talked about on the last downpour. It's not like all the penalties are that way, right? Like they give up 5 power plays to Boston in that last Boston game. Only one of them was, or two of them were really like from being like maybe too physical in that game. The rest of them, normal kind of penalties to take. And yeah, you only had one power play opportunity in that game. I would argue that, officials should be kind of keeping that a little bit closer. As great a team as Boston is, it's not like they're that much more disciplined than anybody else, that they should be getting a 5-to-1 penalty ratio, right? So I think that there is something there. The other thing that he talked about during that and everything was, I'm forgetting it now. Let me
The
scroll back up.
officiating
The
and
officiating, yeah, thank you. And
yeah, no, it was. Oh no, I was just gonna say it's interesting that he would. I don't think that's a secret in talking
no.
about the PWHL not having dedicated refs, but I thought it was it. He certainly kind of pulled the curtain back before when he did that with Jenna's concussion, but I didn't expect him to do that.
No, I didn't either, but it does answer one of the I don't want to say like it's a complaint, but I guess I will. Like bigger issues that I've had with the PWHL, and not just this year, but kind of all along, is the inconsistency when it comes to officiating game to game, and that is something that I do think the league has struggled with at times, and I thought that Steve O'Rourke yesterday, when talking to him, did a good job of addressing that, but giving the reasons why it is that way. And for those who are unaware, the PWHL does not have full-time officials. The NHL is really the only league that has full-time officials. And he talked about this, saying that, you're talking then about officials that are not just officiating PWHL games, but they might be officiating AHL games, college games, Canadian Hockey League games potentially, right? High school games, whatever, based on where they are location wise. And all of those different leagues have different rules. And when you're officiating all of those different games and you're having to bounce from league rulebook to league rulebook to league rulebook, you enter these situations. And when you see something that is not going to just be standard, like a tripping call, whatever, that's going to be pretty uniform across leagues, it takes you a second. It's not second nature for you to make the call. And especially with the PWHL, given the unique rule set that they have, and this was his point, it sometimes then can be difficult because you're not, the officials aren't thinking that way because they're having to kind of consciously go through the rule book in their mind. Okay, these are the situations that apply to this game. It's not just innate for them the way it is if you watch an NHL game and those officials, it's really easy for them to make those calls because those are the only calls they ever have to make. And that it's a really difficult situation for these refs to be put in. I agree with him on
Right.
that. That would be extremely difficult. You're having to watch this stuff at speed, see what you're seeing, interpret that just generally, and then also figure out where does that apply in the league that I'm in right now. And that's just like an extra layer that, realistically shouldn't be there for officials, right? You don't want that in an ideal perfect world for sports. You wouldn't have officials that are having to think and keep track of multiple different rule books at any given time. That's just not how you would do it. But it's the reality that this league has to operate in right now while it's still in its infancy, while it's working on growing, while they're trying to grow professional women's hockey in North America. And eventually, hopefully, the money's there where you don't need to rely on this. But I thought that was a big thing for me because it's one of those things that it was like I like vaguely knew that, but I never really thought about it in
Mm.
that way to kind of explain why sometimes the officiating is a little inconsistent. But I think that it's a very normal human thing. And I think that he did a really good job of explaining it. We probably butchered it all along here, at least I have. But I was very appreciative of that explanation. I think it makes a lot of sense, and it does make me certainly have more empathy for the officials than I already did. Just having to be the ones that have to deal with all the fan backlash from both sides every game anyway.
Well, certainly your username on any like social media wouldn't be anything about yelling at a referee, right?
Yeah, no, never.
No, yeah, it's like that's something, and maybe I'll kick it out at the end and be like, oh yes, we're gonna do a fluff thing on O'Rourke, but it's not something you like that, and maybe it's because it was at a practice, but that sort of detailed explanation about hey, the transparency, I think is good, especially for a league like this because we could sit here and do another episode on some of the issues that we've experienced, fans have experienced, whatever. And that's just on it being an expansion team in this league. As you mentioned, it's in its infancy. You're just going to have to do the growing pains of the
Yeah.
PWHL, right? There's a lot of that. And so I think transparency is good, though, so people can see, hey, this is why this is happening. This is why, that's, and that's something too, at least not so much on the hockey, but like with the merchandise, at least, right? Because there's been
Mhm.
a ton of stuff on that at least with jerseys, and as someone who's worked in sports retail, jerseys typically are ordered the year in advance. So the Torrent didn't have a ton of advance for this anyway. So they're just trying to keep up, especially with merchandise. And I don't think you were there, but I talked to Hannah Murphy. Nope. Corinne Schroeder about her mask, she had
Mhm.
a kind of quick turnaround on the design and everything because she didn't really know what it was going to look like, right?
Yeah.
So I just think the transparency on a broader scale is good for something like this when there is frustration because of some of the different things. And then one of the last things I'll go to before we move on from the penalties and such, the stick penalties are funny just because of the drills where they've been trying to take away the stick.
Yes.
I do find that a bit amusing. I don't think maybe the coaching staff does because it's something they're trying to improve upon. right? But yeah, no, and again, it was you know, a lot of this has been was super insightful with O'Rourke. And so, but yeah, no, it's a good point. It's not like this is a team that's going out there and headhunting.
Right.
There are rare instances where that's happened, but hey, that's, I don't know. It's a fast game. Again, as you mentioned, when they on the table about being fast and physical, this is a sport that is very fast and can get very physical. Unfortunately, those will get mixed in there. I kind of want to change it different. Change it different? Yes, I do the English goods. Move over to the lines because we asked them about the change that was made on the top two lines, and then the third line. With that first two lines, I know this was something that a lot of folks were really interested to see was the Bilka Carpenter Knight line that seemed somewhat inevitable,
Hmm.
but I mean, it was working out pretty well. I mean, Carpenter's been racking up points. Hillary, even though she's got the one goal in the season, has been racking up the assist numbers. And Julia Gosling's had a really strong start to the season. She's already, I think, going to have, I can just scroll down. Yes, she is 1 point away from beating her point total from last season in three times less games. She's nearly a point per game player right now. Um, and it was interesting to kind of get his thought process on this. When it happened, Dylan, right, ahead of that Frost game, I think it both made sense to us to see that for a couple reasons, right? It doesn't isn't super shocking. I think O'Rourke got a chuckle out of it that the USA line is reunited.
Yeah.
Uh, but also, maybe getting a little bit more out of Danielle Serdachny and Jesse Eldridge, the two who scored in the Frost game,
Yeah.
and Julia Gosling, who's had a strong start to the season. I will go ahead here quickly and mention this with the quote, and then I'll let you talk about it. But it was interesting to hear that um, O'Rourke was like, okay, we kind of got her to start holding on to pucks, making plays, making the right play, making her play every time, getting the confidence.
You always look at all your combinations. Early on, I thought Julia was a good fit there for that line, and I like where she's taken her game to. And now, like in the last handful of games, it's been awesome to watch her hold on to pucks and make her play. Early on, she was just making plays. Like, is that the right play? Wrong play? Now she's making her play almost every single time. She's confident, should be confident because she's gotten points, she's been selected, she's played well, she's coachable. All the things we talked about of just playing to her size, playing to her abilities of her skills, she's doing that night in, night out. And I felt like that combination of going back with both Carlton Knights would be a good combination there. And then putting Gauze with Dax and Jesse, I thought would just be a nice combination there, and to just see if it kind of sparks something with the group, right? And again, Dax scored. Gauze, I mean, they were effective in the night. We had some breakdowns, but I thought they were effective in the offensive side of things, and that's what we're pushing for.
Right, you got to let them gel, right? I mean, I don't think you can base anything on the one game.
Yeah.
With the points, and now kind of not maybe, and maybe I'm misinterpreting this, right? But not having to have her go to two of the best players in the world, it's like, okay, we can trust you, and maybe you can help give a jolt to these other players in Serdachny and Eldridge who yeah, you could say they were snake bitten. I mean, Jesse got
Hmm.
that goal against Boston at home, and you'd hope maybe the floodgates would open. They haven't quite, but maybe she's starting to pick things up. I just think it makes. I thought with Gosling, in that explanation about how she's effectively, you're not having to rely again on Carpenter and Knight to help her pick things up. She's playing her own game now. I thought that made sense, and it just kind of added to things. Does anything stick out to you about um, his explanation on that? Because I know Sir Dacney was someone that we talked about again on the last episode of the
Hmm.
Down Four, and you know, certainly wouldn't help to have someone who's I'm going to use I guess this is a general sports term, but I use it more in soccer. Someone that's in form in Gosling
Hmm.
to play alongside a Sir Dacney, and maybe you know they can help build points with each other.
Yeah, it's something that I don't know that anything necessarily
Bless
Excuse
you.
me. I don't know that it's anything that he said specifically about it. It was, it's a coach answer about moving lines around, right? At the end of the day, you're always looking to get people going. We know this from talking to numerous Kraken coaches in the past, right? The way hockey works with the forward groups, a lot of times it's a pair that you like together, and
Right.
then you kind of shuffle around that third spot on the line. And quite frankly, yeah, Hillary Knight, Alex Carpenter makes a pretty good pair. And in a lot of ways, I do feel like Jesse Eldridge and Danielle Serdachny make a pretty good pair, just complementary pieces to each other. I do think that Hannah Bilka and Julia Gosling are the ones that make sense to kind of bounce back and forth between the two lines. I don't hate the idea of just kind of thinking about it on my own. I wish we had more than the one game sample size so far of the
Right.
Minnesota game, a Minnesota game where once the Torrent were kind of out of it, the ice time, he started distributing the ice time to the bottom six a little bit more. I mean, that's where you see like season high ice time for Jenna Buglioni and the fourth line. You look at that second line, the Serdachny line, kind of, only 13 and a half or so minutes a night for everybody on that line. First night under 20 minutes, I think, for the top line, or at least for like
Huh.
Hillary Knight and stuff. I know they've had some other games under there, but it's first one in a while that they were under 20 minutes. Um, so some of this I'll just say it's just working off the limited sample size. But I don't hate Hannah Bilka being with Carpenter and Knight, adding some speed to that line because Alex Carpenter can play fast. So giving her somebody that can play fast with her, I think is good.
Mm,
I think that was maybe missing because Hillary Knight and Julia Gosling, they're not bad skaters, but I wouldn't say that their games are speed based. Right, that's not
right.
really where they're generating what makes them special offensively, and so I think having Hannah Bilka with Alex Carpenter, they can play off each other speed based wise. Hillary Knight can go out there, provide space for them, be a net front presence while they kind of then can play to the perimeter a little bit. Having a distributor from the perimeter in Hannah Bilka, I think, is probably good. Alex Carpenter loves to be in that slot area, wants the puck there. Hannah Bilka can get her the puck there, or Hillary Knight, backdoor, net front, net side, wherever Hannah Bilka can get her the puck there. So I do like what that line could put together. And then as far as Julia Gosling going down to play with Serdachny and Jesse Eldridge, I think that's just more of like a very traditional hockey line when you
Mm,
have them out there because you have the kind of do everything center. You have the net front presence player in Jesse Eldridge, and then you have the shooter in Julia Gosling. And it's like
right.
a very just kind of classic setup kind of line. And I think the idea of having like Jesse Eldridge, who does such a good job playing net front and being there for rebound opportunities with somebody who's going to shoot the puck as much as Julia Gosling's going to shoot the puck, I think makes a lot of sense. Julia Gosling leading this team in shots. Jesse Eldridge, so many of the opportunities for her, I think, are going to come, and already have on rebounds or shots that get tipped along the way and then don't quite end up on net, right? Jesse Eldridge is always in a position to make a play happen when the puck's in there close and around the goaltender. Having Julia Gosling, who is going to be a volume shooter out there with her, I think is going to work really well. And then obviously Jesse Eldridge can screen the goaltenders, all of that kind of stuff as well. And then I think it also helps because it gives Serdachny also a shooter that she can pass to, that she can make plays to. You look at what Serdachny does really well. It is flying through the neutral zone with speed, the zone entry, but then where does she go with the puck? Right. And I think Serdachny with Hannah Bilka, you had two perimeter speed base. I want to be the person dishing the puck out. There wasn't that like obvious person to dish the puck to. You just end up in situations where they're kind of throwing it at each other. Julia Gosling is like the natural, like she's the one you want with the puck once you're set up in the offensive zone because of her elite shot, because she's going to want to take that shot and she's going to be able to score goals with it. So I am intrigued by that. I think it takes some of the offensive pressure off of Serdachny. I think it's going to help lead to increased production for Jesse Eldridge just because there's going to be more rebound opportunities, more opportunities for her to do her thing and what she's so good at. And I think not much really changes for Julia Gosling other than then she might get the puck even more than she
Mm.
was because she doesn't have to share it with Hillary Knight and Alex Carpenter, two of the best of the business. She can just be the focal point of a line and really just worry about putting herself in a good spot to use her elite shot.
So effectively, to dumb it down into really short form, this could work wonders just given the sort of way that the two wingers
Yeah.
play. Because as you mentioned, that was something that I thought. Was it Bilesma last year? Remember Dan Bilesma, who said it was typically. I know this is a hockey thing, but it's the first time I heard it in my infancy of this sport. Is that you use the pairs on the lines, and then you typically will add from there. Yeah,
Yeah,
it just
we
sounded like this
he
will
talked about it. We
benefit.
did hear about it from Hackstall the year or two previous as well. I just think again, it's one of those just kind of ubiquitous hockey coaching
Right.
things. Yeah.
But basically, it does sound like, yeah, given the way that the wings play compared to the duos, this should benefit those two lines. And it's funny that, as you mentioned, even with the limited ice time, um, in that Minnesota game, that it is that Serdachny line that scores the two goals. I find that a little bit funny. We'll see. But yeah, you give it some more time. And as mentioned, earlier when talking about the play in the offensive zone, they're still kind of getting to that. They're just now getting to stuff like that. So it could all be coming. I wouldn't be super surprised if that's the case. We'll move down to the third line here. Um, and it's always fun to me, Dylan, when quotes, about play style and players line up, like everything kind of clicks. Like when we talked to Lexi Agia during training camp, and that line of Agia, Bucky, and Michaela Grant Mentis, and Natalie Snodgrass, I don't think they've seen any changes at all. I think maybe once in the preseason, Jenna Buglioni might have been in there with those two wings, but that one's been pretty consistent. And Lexi said that her and Natalie Snodgrass are two forwards that like to battle for pucks. They like to be hard, against the wall. Uh, and don't that's not to discredit Bucky either, because it's not like Michaela Grant Mentis backs away from any physicality either. But that was something that was talked about on the road trip. I mean, on the homestand, was how it just seems like that group was cooking things up pretty well. Offensively, they hadn't gotten a reward. And then immediately in the first game of the road trip, it's New York, that New York game where they had the bulk of the scoring. I think Alexia Gia was able to get another one in the next game, and they do seem to be clicking a little bit. It's Natalie Snodgrass who doesn't have a goal yet, but O'Rourke was very intentional, saying he's not worried about her. He's not worried about her finding a goal. And to that point, at least in the Boston game and a little bit the Minnesota game, it feels like there are a lot of instances where she's able to find some free ice.
Mhm.
Uh, and sometimes maybe I wish she'd hold on to a little bit, wait for someone else to come in the zone with her, so it's not just her on the goalie with someone on her hip. But yeah, I'm not
Again,
super
that's what they're working on. The
right.
zone entry and what happens
What do I
after
do
that.
now?
Yep.
Help. Yeah, no, that's a good point. It's funny, yeah, 'cause, now that we've had that conversation to be able to apply that there. But yeah, just everything he talked about though with that third line was basically what Agia had said was that this is a group that's hard on, the forechecks there, they're hard on pucks, they got good sticks. It's like a really reliable line, I guess you could say. But yeah, what stood out to you about how he described? Because it seemed very much like, as you mentioned, to use a term you used earlier, the eye test matches what he was talking about.
Yeah, I mean, he was just enthusiastic, right? He sounded like a coach who it get, it really enjoys having a line like this that he can trust, that he can lean on, that he gets to coach. Three players who, as much fun as it is, I'm sure, to be able to coach players like a Hillary Knight and Alex Carpenter, these, almost mythical style figures in the sport. When you're a hockey person and then you get to coach like hockey players that are, you know what I mean, like that are gonna play the game the way that it was back when you were growing up and you were playing and everything like that. And that's really how these three play the game, is that they are hockey players and they play hockey. It's not necessarily going to be the most skilled game out there, right? Like they are a third line for a reason, but boy, do they take care of business, and they can kind of be deployed in a variety of different ways. And I think that as a coach, that's something that you're always looking for, and that is unbelievably valuable to you when you have that. And when I look at like their deployment, their ice time, it's very
Mm.
consistent. Especially here lately, they're getting more and more ice time because of the success that they're having, and because I think Steve O'Rourke is learning that he can deploy them in different situations. They don't just have to be an energy line. They don't just have to be a matchup line. They can also be a drive and press offensively line. And so I think that that's kind of, that was like the subtext of
Mm.
when he was talking to us about everything. Was I just got the idea that he was just like, these are players that I can relate to from having a life in hockey, that they're gonna play that way. Um, and when I look at them, they are, we talked about them on the downpour, but you look at like Grant Mentis, who is really, this is like Bucky's first year being a center full time in the PWHL. That's not normally where she was. It's not where she was during training camp. If you remember, she was actually kind of on the wing with Buglioni on that third line
Right.
a little
Thank
bit.
you. Yep.
And they made the decision to go ahead and switch Bucky over to center, and she's taken to it really well. Face-off number, it's like 44%. Like, okay, that's fine. It's not, she's not getting killed out there. But certainly for somebody in their first year playing center, that's pretty solid. But you look at how she's able to play defensively, and she's somebody that you would not guess this is her first season in professional hockey playing the center position,
Mm.
because of how solid her positioning is defensively, because of how well she's able to deal with things, help out in the corners, help out her defenders in the corner, help out with the slot, help out net front. She's just somebody who gets it in the defensive zone. And I think that that's been really impressive. I mean, she is on pace to demolish her block shots high for her career in the PWHL. She's also already halfway to her point total from last season in only
Oh
a
well.
third of the amount of games. So she's also being able to take care of things in the offensive zone. Lexia Gia is just, we gushed about her on the downpour and everything that she brings on the forecheck and stuff. And as for Natalie Stodgrass, I look at Natalie Snodgrass, and again, it's kind of one of those things where, like I was talking about with Jesse Eldridge, sometimes you need a player out there who's going to like create space for their line mates or create opportunities, and that's really what it feels like Natalie Snodgrass does really well. Is she goes in heavy on the forecheck. She's able to win puck battles. She's able to win board battles. She's able to get possession of the puck, keep possession of the puck, make a play to one of Grant Mentis or Agia, and then she goes to the net front and she causes disruptions there. I think one of the things that Natalie Snodgrass does really well, and that we haven't really talked about a lot, is she's very good at physically engaging defenders,
Mm.
right? Not just like putting herself in a position to be available for a backdoor pass. Like, the difference between Natalie Snodgrass and Hillary Knight is Hillary Knight's going to play off just enough that she can get lost kind of by that defense, and they're going to kind of leave her with a little bit of time and space. And so if she's able to get open, and Alex Carpenter, whoever, can throw the puck over to her, she can make that play because she'll have that time and space to make a skill move. Natalie Snodgrass approaches that same kind of role very differently, where instead of going, net front and trying to screen kind of the way Jesse Eldridge does, instead of trying to get lost behind them and play off the defense a little bit like Hillary Knight, she's like, I'm going to go and physically go side to side with this defender, and then I'm going to slowly start backing up. And once I've been engaged with them physically, no defender wants to disengage physically, right? Like, that's partly why they play D, is because they want to be physical, right? And I've talked about this a lot with Kraken players and stuff. Once you've engaged them physically, they really don't want to disengage. They want to try to feel like they're winning a battle. And so if you just slowly
Um,
start letting them win that battle, pushing you, pushing you, pushing you, yeah, they're pushing you out of position, but they all of a sudden are pulling themselves out of position as well, because they're just kind of leaning against you. And then you can kind of walk them out of the way. And I think Natalie Snodgrass does a really good job of doing that. And so she doesn't have the shot totals that the other two on that line has. It's not really her role. her role is to open up those lanes. And when you look at the goals for like Lexia Gia and her ability to kind of get to the net front, I can't help but think that some of that is she has that lane because Natalie
Ah,
Snodgrass has cleared it for her.
got it.
And so I think that's the thing. Will Natalie Snodgrass end up with as many points and as many goals and as many highlight reel moments as the other two? Probably not. But the reason those other two have those highlight reel moments and opportunities is because of Natalie Snodgrass.
So even on the line that I jokingly referred to as like the lunch pail, bring yourself to
No,
work
that's who they
line, there
are.
is someone who really truly further embodies that than Natalie
Yes,
Snodgrass. I
definitely.
A lot of it starts in our own zone. They're really good and responsible in our own zone, and they don't spend much time there, so they get out and they get going. They forecheck really well. All three of them are really good puck hounds. They stop on pucks. They got good sticks, and then from there, they're good below that goal line. Like Bucky, she's had some amazing cutbacks. They understand our concepts of where to be if we're in trouble to reset a puck or to find the soft areas. Like Matt's found some nice soft areas, had some good scoring chances. She's had some good scoring chances off the rush. So for me, Matt's is just a matter of time. You always worry if someone goes out there, they come out of a game with 0 shots, 0 chances. But she's coming out with multiple shots out of the game, multiple grade A chances. That just a matter of time before she scores. And I think for me, I don't see her gripping her stick at all. I see her still in the process of flowing and playing great. But that line has been exceptional. I know early on, Bucky, after a couple games, said, I'm minus. I said, plus minus means nothing. And the minuses you took were things that we were learning, right? Like line changes, support check stuff, right? So I wasn't worried about it. Now they're getting points and they're playing good defensively. They're playing good offensively. That plus minus is changing now, and they feel good, right? They feel good about themselves. So yeah, they've been a pleasant surprise.
like this. I already enjoyed talking to O'Rourke yesterday because he was fun to talk to. But it's fun also again when it feels like you're looking at a map and you can see everything in greater detail now is kind of how I would
Mhm.
look at how this was all talked about. So no, it's a good point. Yeah, no, it's so cool to me, Dylan, and I will sidetrack very briefly because we will keep on topic. But this is. And I know this was happening, and you guys primarily with the Kraken did this when they started, but this is the first year of this team, and there's just so much to look at, and which is so fun to
Yeah.
me, because it's not super to the point, um, cut and dry. There's a lot of different things that makes everything work, right?
Yep.
And so that's why I do this. That's why we do this. Why I enjoy talking to you. All right, we're gonna stop kissing ass. Um, the power play was interesting because the New York game, obviously, you can put a little bit on that, but it's the end of the game. You're making a push, so you can kind of discredit that a little bit. But the Ottawa game, for them to come out and see the power play success zone was nice to get that out of the way, kind of get it going. Feel like maybe you've already got the talent and the pieces. It's just about putting things together. But as of late, and dating back to the end of that homestand, the power play, the advantage hasn't quite been an advantage. I feel like they've had some looks, but even the last few games, as we talked about with some of the offensive zone play, it does kind of look disjointed. And the answer that Steve gave us about that kind of related to that, it
Hmm.
was the lack of practice time that you get. It's just about how they're trying to manage everything when they were on the road. Um, I think the analogy and the explanation he used ahead of the Minnesota game was that you only had about an hour and 10 minutes of practice time and got to get the goalies warmed up. There's some things I want to get to, and by the time that they get to power play, it's like 12 to 15 minutes, and or less. The ice isn't as good, so
I think in the special teams, when you go on the road, it's a little bit tougher to have the time to get it done. Like we went to Minnesota, we have an hour and 10 minutes practice time. We got to get goalies warmed up, so that takes about 10. Then we have practice and things we want to get to. We dedicated about kind of 12, 15 minutes to it at the end of practice. The ice isn't quite as good, you know. But I think that it's still a strength. It would be nice again. Early on, we didn't get a lot of opportunities in the first few games. Then we started building up like 3-4 opportunities. We've kind of been back down to that 1, 2, and kind of spread out. It's nice when you get flowy and you get a couple opportunities, say within a period and a half, where you get a couple rhythms to it and it gets going. So I like what Bummer does. It's just ebbs and flows. And we're in one of those ebbs right now, and it'll flow here again. And yeah, we'll see. I stay out of it. I let Christine do her stuff with it, decide on personnel. I know she wants some tweaks to it, just to see some different looks, and go from there.
There are a lot of factors that go into maybe seeing that dip. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know. What did you take out of that? And is there anything maybe that he didn't mention or that you've observed, you know, since that latter part of the homestand with the power play that sticks out to you? Maybe if it's, you know, it's coming, that sort of thing, and, you know, maybe not to freak out about it, or you're seeing something that you want to see adjusted.
Yeah, I mean, I think he did a kind of a nice job at the end of almost like TLDRing everything that he had talked about by just being like, look, special teams, it ebbs and
Right.
flows. We're in an ebb right now, but it will flow again in the future. And I was like a torrent, I really wanted to throw in there.
Uh,
He's got to get good. He got to keep that branding in there. Look, it's still the third best power play in the league. So it's not like it's
Good point.
struggling that much, right? They're still finding ways of getting it done with the player advantage. So
Yeah.
it's
Wow.
not it's definitely not like, slam on the alarm, let's get the red lights going, all of that kind of stuff. That being said, I totally hear what he's saying about it being difficult to work about on it on the road just because well, this goes beyond just them being on the road. This goes back to the idea of them being an expansion team and how much they're trying to build out of everything, which is what we started this off talking about. It's hard to get going and figure out all of your systems, get all of your systems ingrained, let it become muscle memory, let it become second nature for all of these players. And then you throw special teams on top of it. Like you have to prioritize 5-on-5 year one. You have to be doing that when you only have an hour's worth of time to practice. You have to prioritize 5-on-5 because you're going to play 95% of the game at 5-on-5. That's just the way it is. Well, maybe you're going to be down a player if you're the Torrent because you take so many penalties, but so maybe it's not. But you're definitely not on the power play that often if you're this group. And so I get the struggle that this coaching staff has to deal with, where they just don't have a ton of time. And then also going back to what he talked about when we talked about them taking too many penalties, they're not getting a ton of power play opportunities in game. And when you're not getting a lot of opportunities in game, it's hard for your players to get into a rhythm on the power play. This is something that again is one of those like ubiquitous coaching things. Go follow any team in any league for like a year. At some point you're going to hear the coach talk about this, about how it's hard when you're only getting one, maybe two penalty, power play opportunities in a game, and they're separated by like 35 minutes and an
Yeah.
intermission, and you just what I mean, like it's just hard to get everybody on the same page and let your power play become that much more lethal when you're just not getting the in-game reps, because there is just nothing that works like those in-game reps, especially on the power play. So I totally get where he was coming from with his answer to us. I agree with him that as rough as it's looked here recently, I believe in the talent on this team, that they're going to be able to figure it out and continue to have success there.
Well, you mentioned the reps, and one of the, you mentioned sort of some of the sayings that come in hockey. I mean, with power plays, like what is something this team doesn't have with power play is time and history together. Like,
Hmm.
it's not something that I'm gonna sit here and hoopla about, maybe throw a brick at me if I hoopla. But yeah, no, I mean, it is just interesting on this like super basic level to look at and say, okay, you've got Hillary Knight and Caleb Barnes is the one quarterbacking this, and Alex Carpenter and Julia Gosling. And, it's easy to get greedy and potentially want more from that. But yeah, again, we're 10 games in, which is crazy to think about. But you mentioned, having distance between power plays. I mean, we'll have distance between games in a bit because they'll throw the Olympics in there, as
Hmm.
long as there aren't too many holes in the ice. One of the last things with O'Rourke about, and then there's a couple things I want to kind of like tidbit at you because I know we should get out of here. But the goaltender situation, I know there's been a lot made about it, right? Because for one, I don't think, anybody, not a majority of people expected Hannah Murphy to play at the level that she's played um,
Yeah.
to begin her, I almost said NHL, her PWHL career. Just add a fourth goalie to the Kraken, it'll be fine. Um, Corinne Schroeder is a veteran. She's the league shutout leader for a reason. And CJ's been very strong in the work that they've been able to get, not just in the PWHL, but they've had a pretty extensive professional hockey career dating back further past the PWHL when there were other professional women's leagues. Um, and it was interesting to me, Dylan, for him to just admit, hey, this is difficult to manage three goaltenders. It's
Hmm.
challenging. And even he mentioned it. It was some. It's interesting, and it is different, right, with NHL because I did talk to Kraken goaltender coach Colin Zulianello about working with this trio and how it does require more minutes to get the different goalies warmed up to make sure you're working with all three of them, getting enough reps, getting enough shots, and then he mentioned obviously coaching the 23 players. He mentioned that it's a juggling act. So it was interesting to me to hear that. Um, what were some of the other tidbits he talked about? If you win the game and you play well, they'll probably go back to you the next game. So I mean, that
Hmm.
also kind of makes sense to me. Um, and then yeah, he threw in the part about making sure Hannah Murphy plays because there was the thing earlier. You don't want to leave 20 days in between starts for somebody. That's not super great. But then he did
Yeah.
mention, because I brought this up, Dylan, because I know there are a lot of fans, whether they're Torrent fans or just fans of CJ themselves, who are like, hey, when is CJ going to play? Right. And I
Hmm.
understand that. I want to know people know that I hear that because their bobblehead is coming up,
Yep.
20th of January, Toronto. Am I going to piss people off by saying Toronto like that? I probably will.
You will.
Um, oh, there you go. What are you going to do about it?
That is not how it's said, Charles.
Toronto. Um, but yeah, no, I asked, I made a point of it, Dylan, to ask him about, hey, you did mention CJ was working on something,
Yep.
when asking about the goaltender trio, and um, O'Rourke heaped praise on CJ, saying their compete level, showing what she does there, asked her to improve on one area. She's done that. She's growing in that. It's easy to come in here and be a reserve and go through the motions. She doesn't go through the motions. She competes every day, competes in the gym, not only pushing the goaltender, pushes teammates. So I just think I realize it's 10 games, and especially as you mentioned, the 2 months, and especially when you're in the season, feels really long.
Yeah.
But I do think it's coming, especially with CJ, being in the tandem the last two games. I do think it's like, especially looking at it that way, you're going to be in the tandem. You're like, it's different preparation when you're actually at least going to be suited up. I do think it's like, hey, you're going to be starting soon. I need, like, you're probably wanting CJ to be in some form of rhythm, when that'll come. And I imagine, it would make a lot of sense if it's the former, your former team, it's your bobblehead night. I could easily see that. And, yeah, I don't know. I think it could be that. Anyway, I'm gonna ramble. I gotta stop. Is there anything super surprising about that? Because it feels like, you and I think the last two Downpour episodes have talked about the goaltending.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't hide from it. It is challenging three goaltenders, and to have three good goaltenders that push, it is challenging to find the minutes. Challenging practice, to make sure they're getting enough reps, enough shots on top of 23 players that need their stuff too, right? So it's a constant juggling act with Sheldon, our goalie coach, who we're missing right now. He's at World U18s right now as a goalie coach for Team Canada, which is a good kind of feather in his cap. It shows how good he is. But we got this 1A, 1B, 1C kind of look, and I like the push that's going on. We we kind of talked about if you win that game, we'll come back with you. A good chance we'll come back with you. Schroeds did that. I thought she gave us a chance in Boston, and then you look at it, I got to come back with Murph. If not, because she doesn't play for 20 days in between, and it's a long time, right? And then we have a short window here of 4 games, that we'll see what kind of tandem we have to do there too. And then CJ, part of getting in there is her compete level, showing what she does there, asking her to improve on the one area, and she's done that. She's growing in that. Like, it's easy to come here and be a reserve and just go through the motions. It's easy to come here and be a third and just go through the motions. You guys watch, she doesn't go through the motions. She competes every day. She competes in the gym. She's not just only pushing the goaltender, she pushes her teammates. So that energy, it's amazing to have.
Did anything stick out at you about his answer to that?
No, I mean it's more or less. I guess he went more in depth than I would have thought he would, as far
Mhm.
as talking about the difficulty in managing a 3 goalie rotation and how difficult that is. I think that it's really tough when you have somebody who's already very proven at the PWHL level in Corinne Schroeder, when you have a rookie who's playing as well as Hannah Murphy is playing and has been your best goalie so far this season. It's hard to then to work a third person into that and to try to take away some of those. And I think he brought up a good point with all of it, which is, goalies like having repetition. They like
Right?
having the regular reps. They like getting in there. They have to be in a rhythm to feel like they can, do it, right? Yep, exactly. We've heard Philip Grubauer talk about that plenty. And the way that the schedule is set up for this team, where you go through just large gaps of time where you don't have games. And he talked about that. There's situations where if we double up on a goalie in one section, all of a sudden the other one doesn't play for 20 days. And that's a lot. And so when you're already trying to manage a rotation, a tandem of 2, to then throw a third goaltender into that mix, I get why you would maybe just lean in the direction of keeping it more manageable with just 2 netminders, having them get the bulk of the starts, and then, in this case, CJ becomes really the reserve, which is, more or less what the roster actually looks like and the way that it's kind of mapped out there. So I get that. I think that he's managing it as best as he can. I think that this is probably how I would manage things too. I think if given the way the schedule's worked out, if you do try to work a third goaltender in there, you do run the risk of your other ones being on long rest and then trying to
Mm.
get them back up into everything. So it is difficult. I think if there was a time, yeah, the stretch where you have 4 games in 10 days is an opportunity to do that, where you could get all 3 goaltenders into a game and nobody should get too rusty. And then you're going to be going into the Olympic break where everybody's going to get kind of rusty anyway. So I think like now is as good a time as any. But I will just say I know CJ has a lot of fans. A lot of people want to see them play. I understand why CJ might not get a ton of action this year. It's just because of Hannah Murphy coming onto the scene as strong as she did right away. I don't know if that was the plan all along, right? Like maybe that's a question for Megan Turner at some point if we get to talk to her.
Megan, come
But
on down.
yeah, yeah. But so I don't know if that threw a wrench into things, but I do understand when you have a goaltender playing as well as Hannah Murphy, when you have a goaltender who can play as well as we know Corinne Schroeder can play, you want to get them the regular reps. You want to make sure that they're staying in their rhythm because that's going to give your team the best chance to win.
Yeah, no, again, it makes sense. And I just I hate using this sentence. I do hear both sides of it with, folks wanting to see that with CCJ start. And to O'Rourke's point, and you were there yesterday, Dylan. I mean, does CJ
Hmm.
ever like the body language is never down. It's never that of someone
Yep.
who's upset. Well, at least they don't show it well, right?
Yeah.
So it's and you know who stays late to help with the other players get shots in, the shootout
Hmm.
attempts, right? It's consistently CJ, you know.
Yep.
So, but yeah, these are good things to worry
Yeah,
about
it's a
okay,
good
which
problem to
one of my
have.
good goaltenders am I gonna start? Whoop-de-doo. Like
Yeah.
it's another thing that, obviously again a little bit of a different situation. It doesn't really work right now with the roster construction, the roster limits, but I mean, Kraken have three good goaltenders, and Matt Murray, is working his way back. So anyway, I was gonna tidbit you, Dylan, but I realized we've been going pretty far. I guess my last question to wrap you up here is, you know, and it's been brought up in this episode, but process has been hammered time and time again for this franchise since, we got actual coaches and players and the general manager. Like through 10 games and after talking to O'Rourke and, as I mentioned, being able to maybe see things in a little bit of greater detail or seeing things through the lens of the franchise itself, do you feel any more confident in the process and in what's being built here, or maybe is it just kind of, you're on pace? This is about par for the course of what you expected, that sort of thing. Just, I guess, how much confidence does it instill, or is it just okay? Like this is what I expected. This all makes sense to me.
It's one of those where at the beginning of the year, whether it was conversations I had with you, doing downpour with RJ, whatever, I was really trying to preach to Torrent fans patience and that they were going to have a slow start to the season. Expansion teams just always do. Games are not played on paper with the roster that you have. They're played out there on the ice, and expansion teams always start slow. There's just such a massive learning curve, not just for the systems and working with the coach, and especially given how short the training camp schedule was for them, that was all going to take time, but also playing with each other, having all these players that don't necessarily have a long playing history with one another, having to come together, learn each other's tendencies, learn each other's habits, where so and so likes me to place the puck for them, all of that kind of stuff. It just takes time to build. And it's one of those where it just takes a certain amount of games, certain amount of months of being together. And one of the unfortunate realities of the PWHL is that it is a 30 game season.
Right.
And I know from past experiences with NHL coaches, they talk about the first 20 games when it's a
Yep.
new coach
Yep.
coming in, right? That's the thing. 20 games in this league is 2/3 of the season. And so if it genuinely take 20 games, then look, we're probably in for another 10 games of this team figuring it out and working on things. Now, this is where I think the roster being as solid as this roster is probably speeds up that timeline. Probably
Mhm.
doesn't take them a full 20 games to get used to everything because they're just that good. But I do think that that's what we've seen through these first 10 games was the normal growing pains that should have been expected all along. It's really easy to get wrapped up in the hype and get excited around the team. And I certainly fell into that a little bit too. Once they got that first home victory and they started
Right.
scoring and everything, I was like, okay, they're breaking through. Maybe 5 games is how long it's going to take this group to figure it out. No, I think even I have to take that step back and say, look, this is actually very normal. This is why both Seattle and Vancouver are at the bottom of the standings. This is just the way expansion teams work and operate, and so I'm not hitting the panic meter or anything yet. I think this is all normal stuff. They are going to need to step up a little bit over these like next 5 to 10 games. I think they're in the second third of the season. You need to start turning it around. I know all along O'Rourke has talked about the final month of the season being their big push and kind of pushing down that final stretch. I think if you could start that a little bit sooner, that's probably going to be
Please.
good for you if you want to make the postseason and everything. But yeah, I think nothing has surprised me too much about the start that they've had.
Yeah. And again, like we've talked about, like everybody. Oh no. Okay, sorry. I'm sorting by power play. I was like, how did the Ottawa Charge get to the top of the standings? Um, there is no, you know, there's no bottom feeder, right, in this league.
Right.
Like the two teams at the bottom right now are the two expansion teams that are loaded with talent. Vancouver's been without Sarah Nurse for a good amount of time. You know, Toronto, maybe I'm foolish, Dylan. You can tell me if I'm being foolish. I feel comfortable with them going up against Toronto.
I agree.
I'm going to keep saying that. Toronto and Ottawa, I just think you do have what it takes to be able to, like, I don't know, 9 times out of 10, you can take them on. But like, you look at the top four, New York, dynamic, fast. O'Rourke said that.
Hmm.
Minnesota, they've lost a little bit, but I mean, those top two lines still are very dangerous. And their goaltender 10 is pretty damn good as well.
Yep.
Montreal, we talked about them in the downpour. That Stacy, Poulin, Roque is your top line. Andre Desbiens is your goaltender. And then there's Boston. I'm like, whatever, dude. Like, embarrassment of riches, biblical greed. Like,
Yeah.
there is no easy out on a night-to-night
Hmm.
basis, even though I've discounted a few teams. Um, so yeah, you can't really afford to be in a, as you mentioned, with a 30 game schedule, you can't afford to be in a slump of 10 games. That'll end your season.
Yeah.
5 games even. Like you got to be in there. And I mean, outside of Boston, I mean, the top 2 through 6 is separated by 4 points.
Hmm.
So, anyway,
Hey, Torrent got games in hand. That's like
this is
the
true.
one benefit of this though is that they have not played that many. They have only played 10. You're looking at, Ottawa 5 points ahead of them, has played three more games.
You can make that up.
You could close a 5 point gap in 3 games in this league.
You can. Yeah, this is very true. So, anyway, yeah, I said this might be shorter, but we ended up talking for a bit. So,
All
no, I
good.
mean, that's the point. It's as I mentioned earlier, there's just a lot to talk about, and again, we talked with O'Rourke for 17 minutes. I did not realize it was that long.
Well,
So
and it was
anyway,
longer than that too, because we chatted before and after we were recording
right.
too. It was like
Yeah, we
close to
were.
half an hour. He was very generous with his time.
That is one thing is he's good with his answers, and I'd say he's a relatable coach, so I can certainly appreciate that. Um, so anyway, yeah, the Torrent are back in action on Sunday. What is that, Dylan? The 18th, um,
Sure.
against against the Boston Fleet. That's a night game too. Feels like we've had a few day games with this team or like weird times, so it's nice to have like a traditional, later
Yeah.
game. So it'll be certainly that game and the Seahawks game on Saturday will make this a very busy weekend in this city, that's for sure, amongst other things. So yeah, until we see you next time, take care of yourselves, be well, do whatever you can to make today a great day.